everybody, this is Tyler here once again from the Character Workshop, where I would offer you guys a jelly baby, but instead I actually have jelly bird eggs. But I do wonder, are jelly babies actually real? Have like the BBC ever tried to like make jelly babies like an actual food that you can buy? Because honestly, if jelly babies are real, I probably would get them on a regular basis. Oh, what was I talking about? Oh yeah, sorry. So, it's about time. What I've been waiting to talk about for a while. We're going to be talking about the most popular incarnation of the Doctor throughout the history of Doctor Who. I am talking about no other than the Fourth Doctor, played by Tom Baker. Now, before Season 12, which was the first season to have the Fourth Doctor, began, as soon as it was announced that Jon Pertwee, the previous incarnation of the Doctor, was going to leave the show, the writers were considering who was going to be the next Doctor, and one of the ideas was the Doctor was going to be, you know, a little bit older than Pertwee was, so... And I'll get more on that later. Before eventually they casted Tom Baker, who at the time was around his 40s, I believe, so they didn't really need to worry about that. But without further ado, let us get on to talking about the first season of Tom Baker's Season 12. So, Season 12 introduced, well, obviously Tom Baker as the next Doctor, who basically regenerated into the Fourth Doctor after the events of Planet of the Spiders from Season 11. And he wakes up, and the plot of the first episode, Robots, was about basically the Doctor trying to stop a research institute from using a robot to steal nuclear launch codes to blackmail Earth's government. In terms of companions, once again, Sarah Jane Smith returns as a companion of the Doctor, who she was already with during Pertwee's final season, and she continues to be with the Doctor for a little while. And then there was another companion that was introduced in Robots by the name of Harry Sullivan. And going back to, you know, the points that I was talking about earlier, where like they were considering having an older actor be the Fourth Doctor, Harry was written as like a character that like was going to, you know, take care of most of the action scenes, very similar to Ian Chesterton from the First Doctor era. However, as soon as it was decided that Tom Baker would be the next Doctor, they decided to, you know, get rid of Harry after like, you know, a couple stories, so that's kind of unfortunate. So Harry was with the Doctor and Sarah from like Robots all the way up until the first story of Season 13, which was Terror of the Zygons. And then Unit, once again, makes a return during this era. However, they were only in the first two seasons of Tom Baker's era. Mostly because the new head writer and, not head writer, the new producer of the show at the time, Philip Hinchcliffe, took over the show and wanted to sort of move away from the Unit format that was very prominent during the Third Doctor era. So Unit only appeared 4 times in Tom Baker's era. They were in the first story, which was Robots, and then they were in Terror of the Zygons, and then the Android Invasion, and then the Seeds of Doom. And in terms of like which members of Unit returned, the Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart, played by Nicholas Courtney, once again returns and appeared in both Robots and Terror of the Zygons, and wasn't seen again for a little while afterwards. And then Benton, played by John Levine, once again returns. However, this time around he went from being Sergeant to RSM, and he was on the show during Robots, Terror of the Zygons, and then the Android Invasion. And ever since the Android Invasion, he has not appeared on the show since then. But of course, I can't talk about Tom Baker's era on Doctor Who without talking about one of his most well-known stories, and a highly regarded story by that matter, and that was Genesis of the Daleks, which was from his first season. And it was written by Terry Nation, like a lot of the other Dalek stories from before. However, it did sort of introduce like a new backstory to the Daleks. So basically the storyline with this is the Doctor, Sarah, and Harry were sent on a quest by the Time Lords to stop the Daleks from ever being created. So they went back way long ago to when the Daleks were first made, and their creator was by the name of Davros, and this was pretty much his first introduction to the show, And funny enough, ever since then, you know, Davros sort of became like a recurring character in Doctor Who, pretty much appearing in every single Dalek story after Genesis of the Daleks. So there's that. And yeah, honestly, I do agree with a lot of people. It was definitely a really neat story. Kind of giving us, you know, more of a backstory of the Daleks. And also, I really love, like, near the very end when, like, the Doctor had, like, the wires, and he was just about to, like, you know, put them together and end off the Daleks forever. But then, you know, he stopped, and he was like, do I really have the rights? What if you, like, said to someone that there's a baby that would turn out to be an evil dictator? Would you want them killed? But yeah, it was a really great, like, you know, kind of giving like a moral sort of sense to it, like trying to think, oh, is it really the right thing for me to, like, you know, destroy one of my greatest enemies? So honestly, Genesis of the Daleks definitely worth the watch for a variety of reasons. So as I mentioned before, Sarah Jane Smith continued to travel with the Doctor for a little while, up until season 14 in the story The Hand of Fear. And afterwards, she wouldn't appear with the Doctor again, of course. And funny enough, the next story afterwards, The Deadly Assassin, the Doctor doesn't have a companion whatsoever. Which is honestly kind of weird when you really think about it. And especially one of the writers of the show, Robert Holmes, who was responsible for writing The Deadly Assassin, he said it was pretty difficult to write the Doctor into the story without, like, him having a companion or someone to talk to. So yeah, I guess that kind of shows, you know, that it's kind of important for, like, you know, the Doctor to have a companion in a lot of ways. And not only that, The Deadly Assassin was also reintroduced the Master into the show. So for those of you who don't know, in the Third Doctor era, the Master was played by Roger Delgado. However, unfortunately, the actor passed away 3 months after his final story premiered. So, in order for them to make the Master return, Robert Holmes, the writer of The Deadly Assassin, decided to bring back the Master, and he was planning on leaving the show as script editor so that, like, any writer who wanted to bring the Master can, like, you know, interpret the Master any way they want. And in Deadly Assassin, the Master was played by Peter Pratt, and in terms of his appearance, he was sort of in a more decayed-looking state. From this point forward, the Master will, like, you know, have, like, a new goal in life, not only to, you know, of course, cause mayhem, but also to, you know, survive and try to, you know, regenerate as much as possible, even beyond the 12 regenerations that a Doctor is supposed to have. And then we move on to the next story, The Face of Evil, which was the first to introduce Leela, played by Louise Jameson, who would be the next companion of the Doctor. And in terms of her character, she was a little more on the violent side. She would, whenever she would be around, you know, any foes, she would try to go the violent way. However, the Doctor would normally stop her from doing so. And her character was kind of the reason why, during the first couple of stories, Tom Baker was, like, you know, not a fan of working alongside Louise Jameson, which was sort of unfortunate. It was up until the first story of season 15, which was Horror of Fane Rock, where their relationship sort of improved. And this was because, you know, in one scene, Tom Baker constantly came in ahead of his cue, basically upstaging Louise Jameson. And because, you know, they weren't rehearsing that, she insisted on 3 successive retakes until Tom Baker came in at the right time. And eventually, because of, you know, Louise Jameson's, you know, actions, Tom Baker eventually got respect for Louise Jameson, and their relationship, you know, on stage, on screen, has, you know, improved ever since Horror of Fane Rock. So, you know, Horror of Fane Rock, despite the plot being, like, you know, pretty much sort of a, well, by the title, a more horror-themed elements, it pretty much was crucial in terms of, like, you know, the behind-the-scenes part of it. And then the story afterwards, Invisible Enemy, was the first story to introduce another well-known companion to the show besides Sarah Jane Smith. And interestingly enough, this character wasn't even like, you know, human in terms of appearance, just like a lot of the others. He was a robot, and his name was K9, voiced by John Leeson, who was a companion of the Fourth Doctor throughout pretty much a majority of his run since then, which I think out of all of the Fourth Doctor's companions, K9 has appeared the most alongside him. So, while K9, Leela both traveled alongside the Doctor for another couple stories, it wasn't until the Invasion of Time where Leela decided to leave the Doctor and stay on Gallifrey, which was the Doctor's home planet, home of the Time Lords. So, after Leela left, the Doctor and K9 moved on with their adventures. And then we get to the next season, season 16, which was the first season of Classic Who to really have a long story arc throughout the entire season, which was of course under the name The Key to Time, where all 6 stories in that season pretty much followed one another. And this season introduced another companion of the Doctor named Ramona, played by Mary Tim, who was a Time Lord just like him. Which was interesting, because this is the first time we've had a Time Lord as a companion of the Doctor since Susan Foreman, who was the Doctor's granddaughter. So that was very interesting. And Ramona was there for like one entire season. However, she eventually regenerated into another version of the character played by Lela Ward, who would then play Ramona for throughout all of season 17 and then most of season 18. And this was, of course, to my knowledge, the only time we have had a Time Lord companion of the Doctor regenerate. And I've heard the main reason for that was Mary Tim, who played the first incarnation of Ramona, didn't want to be on the show for much longer, so they decided to have Lela Ward take over for the role of Ramona for the rest of the character's run. Interestingly enough, speaking of season 17, K9, who I mentioned earlier was originally played by John Leeson, he decided to not play the character for season 17, and throughout every story in that season that K9 appears in, he was voiced by a different actor by the name of David Brearley. I'm sorry if I mispronounce any of these actors' names, but yeah, he played as K9 during season 17 when John Leeson wasn't playing as the character. However, it wasn't until next season where John Leeson decided to play K9 again, since he heard that the character was going to leave after that season, so I guess he decided to come back one last time to play the character up until, you know, the character no longer appeared on the show. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's talk about a lot of the major changes that were made to the show starting in season 18, which was Tom Baker's final season. So throughout Tom Baker's run, there have been like 4 different producers on the show. There was Barry Letts, who was also known for producing the majority of the Third Doctor's era. The only episode he was producer of was Robot, which was the first story of Tom Baker's. And then from The Ark in Space all the way to The Talents of Wen Chiang, the show was produced by Philip Hinchcliffe, and his era was considered, like, you know, the best from, like, you know, a majority of the fans, including myself, for, like, you know, incorporating a lot of more, I guess, dark tones to, like, the stories, so that was very cool. And then season 15 to season 17 were produced by Graham Harper, and then season 18 was the first season to be produced by the show's longest-running producer, John Nathan Turner. So, some of the changes that John Nathan Turner made to Doctor Who, one of the biggest ones was kind of making the show, you know, a little bit more serious, not having too many, you know, jokes here and there. And another big change he made was the show's theme song, which was composed this time around by Peter Howell, who sort of made the theme song more of a sci-fi kind of feel to it. However, to be honest, in my opinion, it's like one of the best versions of the Doctor Who theme song, so I honestly can't complain about that. But he made a couple other changes, which I'll explain about later on.